My stomach just dropped a little bit. Okay. There are two main routes that I'm taking with this interpretation. The first one being a literal death has occurred. Someone has actually died. The second possible route would be a metaphorical death. Within these two, I have subcategories. Let me just take a second. Taylor, what did you do? Taylor would describe regret this eloquently and this metaphorically, wouldn't she? She would. She did. It's wild. I didn't know how else to make a video. I have to just go over everything. Hi everyone, welcome to this video. On my channel, I analyze song lyrics very in depth through the lens of literary analysis. This song in particular has been highly requested for a while. I'm sorry it took me a second to film it, but to be honest, I keep changing my interpretation on this song and I still can't pick which one resonates with me the most, so we're gonna go over all of them. Get excited. I will make sure to link my Taylor Swift analyses playlist below. We've done quite a few songs from Folklore and Evermore. Please feel free to request which one I should do below of Taylor or any artist. As a quick disclaimer before we get started, everything presented in this video is my own personal opinion. Music is very subjective, so everyone's gonna have their own take on it. I encourage you to leave your perspective down below. In my analyses, I personally tend to concentrate on diction, which is word choice, and connotation, which can be thought of as the vibes or the emotions that the words elicit. Let's get started. This song title is really interesting. It's very powerful and it's very unique. I don't know if I've ever heard the word ricochet as part of a song title, but if anyone was gonna do it, it would be Taylor. The word ricochet means when something like a bullet or shell or other projectile rebounds one or more times off of a surface. So pretty much it's when an object, in this case a tear, is falling and it bounces and it goes up. So let's think through this for a second. A tear is made of water and like other things, I think like salt. It's a liquid, right? It's not a solid. So a tear won't really ricochet or bounce off of any surface. That's not usually a thing that happens. However, I think what's being expressed here is that the emotions that were within this person are coming out as a tear, and the emotions are so strong and so heavy. They're being poured out in such a violent manner that these tears are able to ricochet. They're heavy with the emotions. They're coming out of the person in a very violent way. So from the song title, we can already tell that there's going to be a lot of very deep emotions expressed in this song. Tears by themselves are a very powerful image. They connote hurt, they connote pain. Sometimes they can connote anger and frustration. It's usually a mix of those things, but whatever specific emotions are felt in this song, they are intensified times a billion. It's interesting that the main definition for this refers to bullets or shells, which are a type of weapon. It's pretty violent. And the word ricochet, it has a little bit of a violent connotation, right? It's usually associated with weapons and weaponry. Weapons are used in a war, in a battle, in some kind of conflict. We have heavy emotions. We have some violent connotations with the word ricochet. There's a lot going on here already, just with the song title. Another thing I find interesting, emotions which cause for tears to flow are intangible. They're invisible, you can't touch them, you can't see them, but something that ricochets is very tangible, right? It's very present in the physical realm. So I find that juxtaposition very interesting. Juxtaposition is when things are set side by side for the purpose of comparison. I think this song is written in such a brilliant way. I'm always in awe of Taylor's writing, but this song in particular, there is so much going on. It's expressing the emotions in a very eloquent way. First one. Actually, wait, before we get started, I'm going to assume that you all listened to this song a billion times. So I'm just going to tell you the perspectives that I have towards this song. I'm going to point all of them out as we go through it. So this may be a longer video, but I really can't decide which one resonates with me the most. It changes. So let's go over the ideas that I have. This song starts off at the wake of some person, right? Some person has passed away. There are two main routes that I'm taking with this interpretation. The first one being a literal death has occurred. Someone has actually died. The second possible route would be a metaphorical death. Okay, within these two, I have subcategories. First, let's discuss the possibilities with the literal death that has occurred. So let's say that this death in this song is literal. Someone has actually passed away. The perspective of this song could be from the deceased person, like their spirit or their ghost. But also, when I read through the lyrics, it sounds like there's more than one point of view. It sounds like there's more than one person talking. So I'm kind of like more partial to the interpretation that if someone has actually passed away, this song is between their ex-love who is living and the spirit who has passed on. It's like a back and forth type of vibe. So those are the two possibilities that I'm like entertaining if this was a literal death. Metaphorical death. Let me clarify what I mean by metaphorical death. I would think of a metaphorical death as a situation ending, but ending in a way that's very intense and very emotional that it feels like a death. It could be the ending of a relationship, a platonic one, a business one, or a romantic one. So you could think about this in a romantic sense as a relationship ending, but that relationship feeling like a death. To the two people in the relationship, it feels like the other person died. It's like that saying, "You're dead to me." Or, and this is a very popular theory, I didn't come up with this myself. The other ones, I was just like reading like this and being like, oh my god, what does this mean? But for this one in particular, I did see it on Twitter. And at first I was like, but then when I looked at the lyrics, I was like, yeah. So this theory says that this is not about love. In fact, it's about Taylor and her former record label. I'm not going to get into specifics about that situation. On my channel, I like to concentrate on the words and the metaphors and, you know, the imagery. I will just state one or two things just for context for our interpretation. Taylor did switch record labels, and her masters, which were kind of like ownership of all of her previous works, she said that she did not have the opportunity to purchase them and to own them. They were sold to someone else. So that created a conflict. Remember how I mentioned that the song title has conflict war vibes? And that's why Taylor is re-recording all of her music, so she can have ownership over it. There is a lot of drama that happened with that, so you can Google that if you'd like. Those are my four main avenues of interpretation for this song. Let's get started with verse 1. We gather here, we line up weeping in a sunlit room. And if I'm on fire, you'll be made of ashes. 2. Even on my worst day, did I deserve, babe, all the hell you gave me? 'Cause I loved you. I swear I loved you. Till my dying day. Okay. We gather here, we line up weeping in a sunlit room. So whoever the narrator of this song is at this moment is alive, we can assume, right? They are attending a wake, which is where you can view the body of the deceased. They are setting the scene for us. We gather here, we line up weeping in a sunlit room. There's a lot of sadness, a lot of emotion contained in that room. What I find interesting is the word sunlit, because that brings forth light imagery, which is very positive. Usually, light usually brings forth clarity. It reveals truth, it uncovers truths, and it's usually a very hopeful sort of image. I find it very interesting that we have light imagery here in the context of a wake. I don't know, it could just be a setting detail. Maybe we're not supposed to take it that figuratively, but that did kind of pique my interest a little bit. I was like, what is going on here? Why do we have light imagery? And if I'm on fire, you'll be made of ashes too. Okay. This third line of this verse is where we could possibly have a shift in perspective. From the word and, this could either be a continuation of this first narrator, the person who's alive, or it could be where the spirit or the ghost of the deceased person takes over. First, I'm going to interpret it as if it's the same person from the beginning of the verse. The first narrator I'm going to call the ex-love, and they're the ones that are alive in this scenario. So we gather here, we line up weeping in a sunlit room, and if I'm on fire, you'll be made of ashes too. So first, let's talk about the word and. It's like a connector word. So this could support the idea that this is the same narrator as the first two lines. They're continuing their idea. They're saying that they're on fire. Why would this ex-love be on fire. It could be on fire emotionally. Usually I align fire with passion, but I don't think that's the case here. I would think more along the lines of anger, maybe regret and frustration, those sorts of fiery emotions. I would also think of pain as well. That could be a fiery emotion, and I feel like that could create tears that ricochet. You'll be made of ashes too. So there's a few ways we can think about that. Maybe, and I'm sorry to be a little bit graphic, maybe the deceased person is going to get cremated. Maybe. Ashes are the powder left over after something burns, and when someone is cremated, they're referred to as ashes. So this could be a reference to that happening to the deceased person, especially because it says you'll be made of ashes. Again, we're talking about the literal death interpretation right now. I will discuss the metaphorical death because this also makes sense in that context. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Even on my worst day, did I deserve, babe, all the hell you gave me? So again, we're still interpreting this as the ex-love who's alive. They're just reminiscing a little bit about the relationship. The word babe suggests that they were in a romantic relationship. It sounds like the relationship was a little rocky. The deceased person gave them hell, and there is a little bit of regret, right? It's like regret and frustration because I'm sure they're upset that the person passed away, because why else would they attend that wake? But they're just like, did I deserve what you did to me? It's anger, it's grief, it's a lot of different emotions. Because I loved you, I swear I loved you. This is the part that like messes me up and I don't know what to think. Till my dying day. This ex-love did not die. Wait, are both of them ghosts? I didn't even think of this. This is like a fifth avenue of thought. My stomach just dropped a little bit. Okay. The whole time, see, it's so different when I talk it out loud. In my lyric analysis of Blue Banisters by Lana Del Rey, I switched the entirety of my interpretation because I was talking it out loud. Okay, I did not think that both of these ex-lovers could be dead. The whole time when I was interpreting this, I was like, why does it sound like it's the same person all throughout the first verse except for that one line? Because the word and in the third line connects the third line to the first two lyrics. So I would assume that it's the same narrator, right? But then when it gets to the last line, I'm like, if you're attending a wake, like, why are you talking about your dying day? My goodness, okay. All right, let me just take a second. Let me take a second. Taylor, what did you do? Before I had that thought, I interpreted this as a shift in the perspective, as if the ex whose wake it is kind of like came in where the word and is. It's their perspective. And I thought that because of the dying day lyric. But now I kind of don't know what I believe anymore. What I do find interesting is the use of the word we, because it groups this narrator with the other people there that are alive and that are humans, not spirits. So it makes them part of the crowd. So initially I was going to say that from the word and, it could be the deceased love interest whose wake they're at. They could literally be on fire because they're getting, again, I apologize for the graphicness, they're getting cremated. The ex-love who's at the wake would be made of ashes emotionally. So that's kind of how I thought about that. Ashes are a powder. It's very like brittle and you can turn it into nothing. So I thought about the ex-love kind of being heartbroken, and that's why they're made of ashes, and how it would be ironic that they were literally ashes and then the ex would be like emotional ashes. So that's how I was thinking about that. But now, I don't know, what is the truth? I also find the use of the word hell very interesting and very ironic because this person is not alive. You would assume they're in the afterlife, either heaven or hell, but I guess they participated in one of the afterlife options while they were living because they got hell from the other person. I just found that a little bit ironic. I'm not sure if I think they're both spirits yet. I think I'll have to get through the rest of the song and have that perspective in the back of my mind and let you know how I feel at the end. Regardless, I want to point out the repetition of I loved you and the use of the word swear. I swear I loved you. That to me indicates that this relationship was kind of rocky because this person is trying to prove that their statement is true. They said, I swear I loved you. If a person is making a statement like that, it's because they have fear that they're not going to be believed. At some point, maybe their actions disproved this statement. So that was the literal death interpretation. There are three possibilities now, I guess. This whole thing being from the perspective of the spirit of the person that they're at the wake for, this being a conversation or a back and forth between the ex who's alive and the ex who passed away, or they're both spirits. Honestly, all of those options are really interesting, but I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Hopefully I can come to a conclusion by the end of this video. Now let's discuss the first verse as if this was a metaphorical death. So I am assuming a relationship has ended and it's been so intense that it's like a death. The other person is dead to them. This could be a romantic relationship due to the use of the word babe. Again, the same things apply as a rocky relationship. The use of the word fire and ashes would also be fitting if this was a metaphorical death. Whichever ex is the narrator in this verse, they would feel like fire because they're angry and frustrated. And they're saying that the other person is like ashes, ash to your fire. This really reminds me of the lyric, I am ash to your fire from Taylor's song Hoax. I did analyze it already. I will link my analysis down below for you. Verse where it says that lyric from Hoax is my best laid plan, your sleight of hand, my barren land, I am ash from your fire. I'm not sure if these songs would be related. I still do plan on doing like a summary video, a few summary videos for Folklore. Evermore got released and then other albums got released from other artists. So it's taking a second, but I still do plan on doing them. I just can't give you an exact date. But this really does remind me of the lyric in the song Hoax. That's something to keep in mind. Maybe we will revisit that in the summary videos. But whoever is made of ashes is the person that was kind of burned by the other person. It's the person who's a little bit weaker. They've turned into powder while the other person is still a fire that's burning and very much alive. There's movement to a fire and it can grow. However, ashes can only get smaller and smaller. They don't really grow. So that could be reflective of the power dynamic. Maybe they're saying that, oh, I burned you so much that you're ashes now. Maybe they feel guilty about the relationship ending and they feel like they really did wrong by the person. And when they say till my dying day, they could just feel like they died the day that the relationship died. This reminds me of a song lyric. This is kind of an older song. It's the song First Day of My Life by Bright Eyes. I love this song a lot. It's super cute. I recommend it a lot. There's a lyric that says, this is the first day of my life. I swear I was born right in the doorway, because that's when they first saw the person they're in love with. So for them, their life started the moment they laid eyes on their soulmate. That's when they were born. In this situation, it could be the opposite, where they died the day that the relationship died. Emotionally, they died. Spiritually, they died. So far, for me personally, I'm more inclined to think it's a metaphorical death. And this is just simply due to my biases. I always have a natural inclination to interpret everything metaphorically, but it could be literal too. That could be valid as well. Now let's discuss the possibility of this being about Taylor's issue with her former record label. Okay, so if this is about her record label, this is going to be the death of like a business relationship and a platonic relationship, because she was with that label since she started singing. She had a 13-year, very fitting, a 13-year contract with her former record label from 2005 all the way to 2018. So she was with them for a very long time. I'm sure she knew this person pretty well. When it says, we gather here, we line up, weeping in a sunlit room, this protagonist means the main character, would technically be Taylor. We don't know that for sure, so I'm just gonna say protagonist, because this could literally not even be about her life. This could be fictional. Folklore is inspired by things not in her life. She literally told us that, with the exception of Invisible String, right? I already analyzed that. I will link that below as well. This protagonist in this dynamic would be the person who was kind of betrayed by this business relationship. So if we view it through that perspective, they're at the wake for the end of this partnership, and the protagonist is on fire because they're angry and they're frustrated and they feel betrayed and they feel like they got stabbed in the back. It's saying you'll be made of ashes too, perhaps because her anger is going to be taken out on him a little bit. She's gonna say her truth. That's going to affect the other person. You have to remember that the fires are what caused the ash. So perhaps the protagonist is trying to express that their anger and their betrayal is so strong that they're not gonna let this go. They're gonna make it known and they're gonna express their truth. So whoever betrayed her, her fire is going to turn them to ash. I feel like this is their way of saying that they're not gonna back down from this fight. Like they're not gonna forget it and be like, oh my God, it's fine. They're not gonna do that. Even in my worst day, did I deserve, babe, all the hell you gave me? I usually do think of the word babe as being associated with a romantic relationship. Perhaps it's put here in a sarcastic way just to indicate that they were close at one point platonically, but maybe it's kind of just to like push a pressure point even harder and to be like, hey, remember how we were so close for this period of time? I think that's what the word babe could signify here. Because I loved you, I swear I love you to my dying day. In the context of this business partnership, maybe she did have, you know, a lot of platonic love for this person and a lot of respect for this person. Dying day would be the day that this business partnership ended. Or perhaps if we want to think about it in line with Taylor's life, it would be the day she found out that her masters were given to someone else. Again, this is all speculation. This could literally not be about her life at all, but there have been so many people supporting that theory, and the Stolen Lullabies lyric, I think, validates that theory. So that's why I'm including that in this video. Chorus. I didn't have it in myself to go with grace, and you're the hero flying around, saving face. And if I'm dead to you, why are you at the wake? Cursing my name, wishing I stayed. Look at how my tears ricochet. Let's think about this as literal death first. When we look at the third line of the chorus, and if I'm dead to you, why are you at the wake? This signifies that the person talking in the chorus is the person who has passed away. It's the spirit, right? So they're saying that they didn't have it in themselves to go with grace. I don't know if they're talking about dying with grace or leaving the relationship with grace. I would assume they're talking about leaving the relationship with grace. Maybe they broke up in a way that was not chill. So I think that's what's being referred to here. And you're the hero flying around saving face. So this spirit here, the person who passed away, they didn't leave the relationship with grace. They're saying that their ex-love became the hero in that scenario because they were probably left or broken up with in a very hurtful way. So they became the hero in that dynamic and they were flying around saving face. So they were going around and maybe getting pity, but they were getting the concern, right? When you save face, you like keep your respect, you keep your dignity, you avoid like humiliation. So this would suggest that the other person, the ex-love who is still alive, may have done things in the relationship as well, but since they were broken up with in a bad way, they're the hero and they get to keep their respect. The other person who did like the messy breakup with them, the person whose wake it is, they're the ones that kind of would become the villain in this scenario, right? But the save face lyric suggests to me that there's more to the story, at least from the perspective of the spirit. And if I'm dead to you, why are you at the wake? So maybe this ex-love at one point in the relationship or towards the end said, you know what, you're dead to me. This relationship, again, sounds rocky and it sounds very intense, but whatever it was, things were said to one another that were not chill, and there's a lot of residual feelings both by the person there and by the person who is no longer like in this realm, by the spirit. There's a lot of emotions still present here, which is very interesting. It's kind of like the spirit of this person who passed. They're like, why are you here if you told me that I'm already dead to you? They are expressing surprise and perhaps frustration as to why that person even bothered to show up to the wake. The ex-love who is at the wake, they're cursing their ex's name and they're wishing that the ex stayed with them. So there seems to be regret present in this song. Like, okay, I think it's a situation perhaps where both people really loved each other, but for some reason it didn't work out and the end of the relationship was not like amicable. The person who would be the spirit now was kind of the villain after the breakup. The ex at the wake would be the hero. I'm assuming the ex never contacted the other person. They treated them as if they were dead. They probably told them that you're dead to me, but they still loved them in private. I would assume the other person loved them as well, but since they were told that they were dead to them, they left it alone. They didn't try to go get them back. That would result in a lot of regret. And so that person whose wake we're at probably died believing their ex didn't want anything to do with them. So when their spirit is like chilling at the wake, they're like, why are you here? Why are you cursing my name and wishing that I stayed with you? Didn't you say that I was dead to you? This spirit is shook right now because they probably died believing that this ex didn't want anything to do with them. And they're probably just very frustrated because if they knew that the other person wanted them back, they would have like gone back to them. So there's a lot of regret here. This is very heartbreaking. This is very sad. Like, I don't even know what to tell you. This is very heavy. It's being portrayed in such an interesting way. The lyricism here is eloquent and exquisite, as always. But yeah, that's the dynamic we have going on right now, in my opinion. I think that is how I would interpret it if this was a literal death. That's what's going on. And I would interpret the chorus as entirely from the perspective of the person who has passed away. What I said earlier about both of them being dead, I don't think that would apply to the chorus. So I may have to take back that interpretation. We'll see at the end. Look at how my tears ricochet. Here's where I'm not sure again, because can a spirit cry? I don't know. Is the spirit saying that their tears are ricocheting? Because literally, you would think the person who's alive would be crying, but it wouldn't make sense for the whole chorus to be from the perspective of the spirit, and then the last line just to randomly be from the ex-love who is at the wake. So I would kind of have to, just due to the structure of everything, due to the sentence structure and how the chorus is set up, I would have to interpret the spirit as crying and the tears are the spirit's tears and they're ricocheting, which would make this more intense. Oh my god, let me tell you why. Because if the spirit is a spirit, they're like a ghost, they're not going to be able to touch anything. They are not in their physical body anymore, right? Their existence has shifted. They're kind of in the intangible realm. So their tears, which are part of them, would also be within the intangible realm. So the fact that they're intangible tears, their intangible spirit tears would ricochet, shows us that the regret and the frustration and the grief they're feeling, they're grieving that possibility of them ever being together, is so strong and so intense. It's not just a person's tears that are, ricocheting, it's the tears of a spirit who is already in the intangible realm. It's their tears. So the emotions that they're feeling are stronger than anything imaginable, right? Oh my god. OMG. If you want to look at this in a metaphorical way, you can think about the wake being them getting closure for the relationship ending. If this was a romantic thing, one of the people in the relationship still wants the other person to stay, even though they're cursing their name. It's the same thing where they love each other, but it's very hard for them to be together. They had to break up, but the love is still there. They can't get rid of the love. In that dynamic, one of the people in that romantic relationship would be saying, look at how my tears ricochet. If we were to think about the chorus as a metaphorical death, then it would be from the perspective of the ex that felt like they were betrayed. Since they felt like they were betrayed, they didn't leave the relationship with grace, and that left the other person to be the hero. They got to keep their respect and dignity, while this person, this narrator, didn't. They were the villain. And when they say, and if I'm dead to you, why are you at the wake? For me, I think I would interpret the wake as a setting where they're getting closure for their relationship ending. Maybe they asked for a meeting to get closure about the relationship, because a wake literally would be a place where people can try to get some closure. So I think it would serve a similar purpose in a romantic relationship, metaphorically. So why did they come to help them get closure? Why are they cursing their name and wishing that they stayed? It sounds like both people in that relationship have regret. The person who ended up being the villain at the end of the relationship is surprised this other person showed up at the wake, showed up to help them get closure. The fact that that person came shows that they care to an extent. However, they're still cursing this other person's name. When it says wishing I stayed, you can view it in two different ways. I'm so sorry to give you so many possibilities, but it's been a year. Every time I listen to the song, I think about it in different ways. Sometimes I think it's completely metaphorical. Sometimes I'm like, this is literal. Sometimes the pronoun is referring to a different person. Sometimes I'm like, OMG, this is literally about the record label. I hope that this is okay with you. I didn't know how else to make a video. I have to just go over everything. Again, we're still talking about a metaphorical death in a romantic relationship, talking about the other person, right? The other person showed up at the wake. Why are you at the wake? The you refers to the ex, the person who was the hero saving face. They came to this metaphorical wake to help them get closure. Even though they came, they're still cursing this other person's name. When it says wishing I stayed, it makes it seem like the ex, the hero saving face, was wishing that this ex, the villain of the relationship, stayed with them. But it could also be a shift in perspective where this ex is saying that even though you're cursing my name, you still showed up to help me get closure. I wish I stayed with you. It could go either way. In this instance, I think the person whose tears are ricocheting would be the person who is asking for closure, person who was kind of made out to be the villain of the relationship. I think they're crying because of the fact that their ex still showed up to help them get closure, which suggests that they still care about them, which suggests that there's still a possibility that they might get together with them at some point in the future. It's the possibility, it's the hope that is very heavy sometimes, because sometimes it would be easier if it was just a clear no, but when there's a possibility of a yes, it's much more painful, right? It makes it very difficult to move on. And if this was a situation about the record label, you can interpret it as follows. When it says that they didn't leave with grace, I think it's referring to them speaking out about the situation. They were aware of the betrayal that they had, and they could have just left everything private, but they really felt like they had to express their truth and to fight for themselves. I think the public would view that scenario as the person not leaving quietly, as not leaving with grace. You're the hero flying around saving face. So the protagonist could be viewing the other person who betrayed them in the business relationship, as going around, getting congratulated on the deal that they closed, the deal that was actually the betrayal to the protagonist. So here, the lyric about the wake, I think, could just refer to the ex-business partner still communicating with the protagonist and still being in contact with them. They're saying that if I'm dead to you, like if you betrayed me that much, I probably am dead to you. You don't care about me. So if I am dead to you, why are you still communicating with me? Why are you trying to talk about the good times or something? Why are you trying to commemorate this relationship? And then the cursing my name would come into play after the protagonist talked about the issue, which may cause the ex-business partner to get frustrated because they were being accused of something. So maybe that's why they're cursing their name. So the person cursing their name, the ex-business partner, could be wishing that the protagonist had stayed in that business relationship. When it says, look at how my tears ricochet, this is the protagonist, the person who was betrayed, and they're crying because their life's work, their master's, was sold to another person. And I can definitely understand why your tears would come out in such a violent and heavy way if that was a scenario. Verse 2. We gather stones, never knowing what they'll mean. Some to throw, some to make a diamond ring. I didn't want to have to haunt you, but what a ghostly scene. You wear the same jewels that I gave you as you bury me. First, let's talk about the literal death interpretation. This, to me, is a pretty metaphorical lyric. We gather stones, never knowing what they'll mean. Some to throw, some to make a diamond ring. For me, it sounds like what's being expressed here is that we allow things into our life, we gather stones, we, pick people, we pick situations that we allow into our life and keep in our life, but we don't know what's going to come out of it. We don't know if we're going to throw the stone, throw that relationship, throw that person away, cut off that relationship, or if that relationship will flourish and will become a diamond ring, a thing of value. And if it's romantic, it would be a symbol of commitment. A diamond ring would be like an engagement ring or a wedding ring. If you want to think about it in terms of the record deal, the diamond ring would indicate an increase in wealth. And it says make a diamond ring, so it suggests that the thing of value is being created, right? It's being worked for or worked towards. That's how I would interpret this verse for either the literal death or the metaphorical death interpretation. If we were to think of this as a literal death, when it says, I didn't want to have to haunt you, but what a ghostly scene. A ghostly scene would be like an eerie scene, a spooky scene. I think the ghostly scene they're referring to is seeing the person, seeing their ex at their wake and realizing that their ex still loves them and probably would have gotten back together with them. So I think it's just spooky for the spirit to have them see a person they thought absolutely hated them show up to pay their respects when they died, and to realize that this whole time they had a chance to be together and they weren't even aware of it. They weren't aware of the opportunity that they had, and that opportunity maybe was the one thing they wanted the most. That's eerie within itself, right? To realize that this whole time your life could have been different. The unspoken love here that remained changed the trajectory of this person's life, the person who passed away. Them not having that data point, that piece of information that there was still a chance, changed the trajectory of his life. Regret is a very heavy emotion. It's a very, very heavy emotion. And I would argue that is the emotion at the forefront of this ghostly scene. This realization is haunting the spirit. The possibility is haunting the spirit. The spirit is haunting the ex because the spirit is haunted by this realization. They're haunted by this possibility. It's wild. You wear the same jewels that I gave you as you bury me. The spirit, while they were alive, while they were in that relationship, maybe gave their significant other some jewelry. And I'm assuming this was many, many years ago. That's why they're so shook that the ex is here. And they're very shook that they kept the jewelry and they're literally wearing it at the wake. Like, this is news to them, right? This is news to the spirit. They had no idea. They had no idea. Communication is important. Like, literally tell people how you feel. So you don't have to worry about this happening. That's one thing of many that we can take from this song. Communicate. Taylor would describe regret this eloquently and this metaphorically, wouldn't she? She would. She did. That would be the literal death interpretation. I think I'm going to take back the possibility of both of them being spirits. I think it's very much one person passed away, they're the spirit, and it is from their perspective, and then the ex-love is alive. I think I'm just going to stick with that. The first verse kind of set me adrift for a second, but I'm back. I'm back. It's fine. If we want to think about verse 2 as a metaphorical death, I would interpret the first 2 lines the same way. And it says haunt you, but what a ghostly scene. I think haunt you can mean like stalking you, like on your Instagram story, or just thinking about you and, you know, saying hi and trying to make conversation whenever they see you in public. I think the ghostly scene would be when they are trying to get closure and they see the other person come wearing the jewels that they gave them, which would suggest wearing a present that they gave them, which would suggest that they're still not over it. So, like, the protagonist in that situation is surprised that the ex showed up to give them closure because that suggests that they care. Not only did the ex show up, but they're also wearing like a present that they were given by the protagonist. So they're like, there are like a lot of clues here that you're not over this and you still care. So that's why it's a ghostly scene to them, because that's also showing regret and kind of like frustration as well, because they don't know where they're at. They're in like a gray area emotionally with the relationship. And it's like, we know that we both care. Why are we not together? It's that sort of frustration. That's why I think this is a ghostly scene. It's kind of eerie to them because it's just like, if we were together, I wouldn't have to like haunt you like this, right? It would just be chill. And when it says bury me, perhaps they're burying them emotionally as they're giving them the closure, as they're having that last conversation. And then if you want to think about it in the context of the record label, the first 2 lines, again, I would interpret the same. You know that I didn't want to have to haunt you, but what a ghostly scene. The haunting would be the protagonist talking about their side of the situation, because that would prolong the situation, right? The ex-business partner wouldn't be able to get away from the situation for a while. It would open up the situation to a lot more people. More questions would be asked. More people would try to dig and find information. That would be a sort of haunting that this could be referring to. I think ghostly scene here just refers to the whole situation that happened. It's eerie and intense. Everything that happened, the betrayal, he said, she said, I think that's what ghostly scene would be referring to. You wear the same jewels that I gave you as you bury me. Okay, this line, in the context of the record label scenario, this line is intense. It's intense. The ex-business partner is burying the protagonist, so this could mean denying everything and maybe saying things that the protagonist doesn't agree with. And also what they did earlier, the initial betrayal, was kind of like killing the protagonist. They're doing all of that while wearing the jewels, while reaping the benefits of the partnership. They're doing all of that with, I don't know, like while wearing a suit that they purchased with the money they got from that deal. That could be what the protagonist is referring to. Not that exactly, but something similar to that, right? It's wild to see someone like very highly benefit from you and then visually be able to see all of the things that you helped them have while they betray you in a very intense way. Like, that's wild. That's why the tears are ricocheting, right? There's pain and anger in those tears. They're ready to like go everywhere. Chorus, part 2. I didn't have it in myself to go with grace, because when I'd fight, you used to tell me I was brave. And if I'm dead to you, why are you at the wake? Cursing my name, wishing I stayed. Look at how my tears ricochet. This is the same as the first chorus. There is just one new line, so that's what we're going to be concentrating on, because when I'd fight, you used to tell me I was brave. In the literal death scenario, that would just be explaining how the person that left that relationship, remember how I said they didn't leave with grace, they kind of left that relationship in a not amicable way. Here they're saying that they did that because they believed that it would help them. Because to them, since every single time they were brave and they stood up for themselves, their partner told them that that was a good thing, like you're being brave, it's really good that you're fighting for yourself. They thought that that would work out for them at the end of the relationship. They thought the partner would express the same sort of thing where they would be like, I'm so glad you're fighting for this. I love it when you fight for what you want. But that didn't end up happening. Probably makes the regret worse because they had a completely different idea of what the outcome was going to be. It's kind of like they left the relationship in that way, but they didn't really mean it. Like they thought it was going to go a different way. So this whole time, they just were regretful and in love with the other person. That's how I'm interpreting that. That line would also have the same interpretation if it was a metaphorical death of a romantic relationship. And in the context of the record label situation, it would be a similar thing. Perhaps the business partner to the protagonist often commented how they respected and appreciated how the protagonist stood up for themselves and fought and advocated for themselves. Now, when they've, had that fallout, the protagonist is still doing the same thing. The bridge. And I can go anywhere I want, just not home. And you can aim for my heart, go for blood, but you would still miss me in your bones. And I still talk to you when I'm screaming at the sky. And when you can't sleep at night, you hear my stolen lullabies. First, let's talk about this as if this was a literal death. And I can go anywhere I want, just not home. I would interpret home as being with the other person, with their true love, the ex that was at the wake. They're a spirit, they're no longer confined to their physical body, so they can go anywhere they want, but they just cannot be with their true love. You can aim for my heart, go for blood, but you would still miss me in your bones. It's kind of what I said earlier, where that person is cursing their name. There's some friction between them, but they still love each other. And that ex showing up to the wake wearing the jewelry they were given by the other person, cursing their name, but still wishing that they'd stayed with them. They still love them, right? Maybe they're gonna say bad things about them. They're gonna aim for their heart. They're gonna go for blood. They're gonna be angry, but they would still miss them. And missing them in their bones is such a physical way to describe it. I've noticed Taylor uses the word bones very often. She used it in the song Gold Rush and also in the song, and she used it in King of My Heart. King of My Heart was the very first video I analyzed on this channel. It's why I wanted to start this channel. So it has a very special place in my heart. I think it's a really good word to use because it makes everything seem more visceral and more intense. When you use the word like heart, like in my heart, it's much more emotional, but in your bones, it's emotional in a physical way. So the ex-love is still missing them, not just in their heart. The emotions are so deep and so strong that they're pouring out of the emotional space within the ex, and they are manifesting in a physical way within a physical, tangible part of their body and their bones. Bones are like hard, but they are being permeated with missing someone, with the feeling of missing someone. So that's very intense. The spirit is saying this, so they have awareness that the ex still loves them. They're getting this awareness now after they have passed on, which is why their tears are ricocheting. And I still talk to you when I'm screaming at the sky, and when you can't sleep at night, you hear my stolen lullabies. Those two lyrics are interesting because I would interpret that more from the perspective of the ex-love. Maybe they're still talking to their ex who passed on, but since they're not in the physical world anymore, they would scream at the sky. Why did you do this? If you didn't say this, we would still be together. I still love you. Things like that. I don't think that the spirit would have to say that because they could just like think about it. Like they wouldn't have to scream it at the sky because they can be anywhere. You can think about screaming at the sky as more metaphorical and not literal in this context. So when someone is screaming at the sky, it's because they're overcome with emotion and they're just very angry and very frustrated and they just can't. They like literally can't even. And when you can't sleep at night, you hear my stolen lullabies. This is a spirit again talking about the ex-love. The ex-love maybe isn't falling asleep because they miss their ex that passed on. They're hearing the stolen lullabies. A lullaby is soothing. It's gonna help a baby fall asleep. So it's gonna be soft and soothing and delicate and comforting, but these lullabies are stolen. So that's a little bit of a juxtaposition in my opinion. A juxtaposition is when things are set side by side for the purpose of comparison. Those two words kind of oppose one another because the act of stealing or the fact that something is stolen is not comforting, delicate, or safe or anything. It's not gonna make you feel safe. That's interesting. There are opposing energies in those two words, opposing connotations. Stolen lullabies in this context would just be the cute things they told one another or the promises they had for one another. I think it's being stated as a lullaby here because they were comforting, you know, just like little whispers, cute little things that were intimate between them. That's how I would interpret it in this literal death of an ex-love perspective. Now let's talk about the metaphorical death perspective. First, let's talk about if it was a metaphorical death in the context of a romantic relationship. And I can go anywhere I want, just not home. Home would be with the other person. So I would interpret the first 4 lines of the bridge the exact same way I did for the literal death interpretation, because these are both about romantic relationships, right? So I would be interpreting the first part of the bridge in the same way. When I still talk to you when I'm screaming at the sky, I think that the protagonist in this situation would be literally screaming at the sky. They know that they can't call the other person. The other person is still alive. Remember, this is the metaphorical death interpretation, but instead of talking to them, they're just gonna shout at the sky. It's like the equivalent of screaming into your pillow. They're gonna do all that they can to not contact the person, but they still talk to them, which means that they're not over it. They still have things to say to them. There are unresolved issues. And they're saying that when they sleep at night, they hear their stolen lullabies. I would still interpret that the same way I did previously. The lullabies would just be like the cute things, you know, their secrets, their inside jokes, things that made them feel safe and comforted and at ease. And they're like stolen now because it doesn't really belong to them anymore because the relationship is over. It's kind of like the ex is keeping the good things that the protagonist gave them, the sweet words, the comforting pep talks. They're keeping that with them when they need it, but it's kind of like stolen now because maybe that person no longer wants them to have it because the relationship is over, right? The dynamic has shifted. It's kind of like, why are you still benefiting from the things that I said to you and the things that I gave you after you hurt me so much? Like, how dare you? Those are stolen lullabies. You don't get to experience the benefits of those anymore after you've treated me so poorly. Right? We're talking about a metaphorical death in the context of the record label situation, and I can go anywhere I want, just not home. Home, I think, would just be a place of comfort. I don't think home would be the record label, the old record label. You can aim for my heart, go for blood, referring to a back and forth that happened. The protagonist is saying that despite all the things you're saying about me, I bet you still miss me and want me back. And I still talk to you when I'm screaming at the sky. It's the same thing I said earlier. They have so many things they want to say to this other person, but they're kind of like containing themselves. There's a lot of pent-up frustration about this business relationship ending. And this last line of the bridge is what kind of validated the theory that this is about the whole record label master situation. And when you can't sleep at night, you hear my stolen lullabies. So this suggests that the protagonist believes the other person feels guilty and they're being like haunted by the guilt. They're hearing the stolen lullabies. The lullabies would be all of the songs that the protagonist recorded while with that record label. They're stolen now because of the whole situation when her masters were not given to her. So that's why the protagonist is using the word stolen. Very intense. Very intense. Chorus, part 3. I didn't have it in myself to go with grace, and so the battleships will sink beneath the waves. You had to kill me, but it killed you just the same. Cursing my name, wishing I stayed. You turned into your worst fears. And you're tossing out blame, drunk on this pain, crossing out the good years. And you're cursing my name, wishing I stayed. Look at how my tears ricochet. This is the last unique verse. Let's analyze it. Let's talk about the literal death interpretation first. I'm only going to concentrate on the new lyrics, not the repeated lyric. One of the new lyrics says, and so the battleships will sink beneath the waves. So battleships connote violence, war, just like the word ricochet does. And if the battleships are sinking beneath the waves, it's kind of suggesting that the war, it's close to being over. It's kind of like the spirit is saying, like, there's nothing I can do about it anymore. This pent up emotion or this anger, this fight that I have, that I wanted to be with you, it has to sink. it has to be gone. I have to make it dormant or whatever. I can't have it be at this intensity. This also reminds me a little bit of the song Epiphany just due to the war imagery, which is very interesting. You had to kill me, but it killed you just the same. I don't think that the ex-love literally killed the person. Is this supposed to go with no body, no crime? I don't think it does, but no, I don't think that the ex-love actually killed the person. I think that this is talking about when the ex-love probably said, you know what, you're dead to me, leave me alone, don't talk to me again. They metaphorically killed their ex in their mind. So I think that's what that's referring to, but it killed you just the same. I feel like when someone says you're dead to me to another person, they would do that to get rid of the other person so they can feel some peace. But the spirit here is saying, you know what, when you said that to me, I feel like that killed you too, because you didn't really mean it. You still wanted me in your life. Right? Still loved me. Cursing my name, wishing I stayed. You turned into your worst fears. So the spirit here is saying that, you know, you actually became the person that you wanted to never become through doing all of these things. Perhaps the spirit here is saying that if you just would have communicated and let me know that there was a chance we could have been together and you wouldn't have turned into the person you are now. You would not have been bitter and regretful. Maybe your life could have had a different outcome. It could be very ironic where perhaps initially the ex didn't want to communicate and metaphorically killed the ex to avoid becoming a certain type of person, but maybe ironically them doing that automatically in that second started turning them into who they didn't want to become. That's haunting, that's spooky, right? And you're tossing out blame, drunk on this pain, crossing out the good years. Again, this just sounds like someone who's kind of bitter, who's very hurt. The drunk on the pain lyric kind of reminds me of This Is Me Trying, another lyric that I analyzed that I will link below for you. Sounds like this person, the ex, just turned into a very bitter person. They could literally be drunk. They could be drinking their sorrows, or the pain is just making them exist in a state where they're not thinking straight or making good decisions, which is what you would do when you are literally drunk. The spirit is able to decipher these things about the ex. The spirit is saying that, you know, you doing all of this is kind of crossing out the good years. All of the bitterness, all of these things is kind of making what we had less valuable. It's like you don't care about that anymore. And you're cursing my name, wishing I stayed. Look at how my tears ricochet. So in the context of a literal death, I do think that just one person passed away, and that would be like the spirit whose tears are ricocheting. And then we have the ex-love who showed up to the wake, who still loved them but never told the person while they were alive. I feel like the ex had fear that they didn't want their life to go a certain way, so they completely cast off the other person. But I think that action of getting them out of their life very ironically was the catalyst to the ex becoming the type of person they didn't want to be, because now, as the spirit is saying, the ex is bitter, they're drunk on pain. All the things they're doing is just not positive, right? Crossing out the good years, taking value away from the good times, leaving very little potential for good years to come because they're in so much pain. And now when it says, and you're cursing my name, wishing I stayed, the ex is still doing this, right? I'm assuming this is after the wake. They still are cursing the ex's name and wishing they stayed. If they were over it, they wouldn't be doing that. They wouldn't even be talking about them. Look at how my tears ricochet. In this instance, it's kind of interesting. I think about the spirit crying for what I said earlier, the regret and the pain and the realization of the possibility of them being together, but also crying because they are seeing their ex in this state. Since they're a spirit now, they can go anywhere they want. They can see what their ex is doing, and they're seeing that they're drunk on their pain. They're being bitter. The spirit still loved their ex. So I'm sure ricocheting tears are more intense now because seeing that their ex's life is painful. And it's painful because the ex still loves them. So there's a lot of very intense and sad emotions that are felt by this spirit here, the spirit protagonist. And it's just incredibly sad. It's incredibly sad. It's very beautifully written, but whoa, it's a lot. It's a lot. Now let's talk about this verse in the context of metaphorical death. In the context of metaphorical death, if this was a romantic relationship, I would interpret this verse in the same way because, again, it's about a romantic relationship. It's about regret. I don't think I would change anything about what I just said. When it says you killed me, I think that just has to do with a breakup and cutting off contact. I think that would be what that's referring to. When it says you turn to your worst fears, I would interpret it the same way that I just did. The protagonist is realizing the other person regrets the breakup too, but they're just not doing anything about it. They're sitting with the pain instead of coming and knocking on their door and being like, hey, let's talk. So it's the same thing that I just said, but it's more spooky and eerie because there's still a chance with this, right? They still have the possibility. They just have to like get off of the couch and do it. Now let's talk about the record label interpretation. And so the battleships will sink beneath the waves. I think that's signifying that like the war has to end at some point. This war of words, perhaps, business war. You had to kill me, but it killed you just the same. The protagonist here is suggesting that her ex-business partner did what they had to do, in their opinion. It's being suggested that they still regret it to an extent. They were in business together for many, many years. I'm sure the protagonist is like, all of those years, was that all fake? Was that all for nothing? Can a person turn cold just like that? I think that's what's being expressed here. You turn into your worst fears. Since they were like having a business partnership for a while, I'm sure they knew each other to a pretty good extent. Maybe the protagonist knew the type of person that their business partner didn't want to become, and now it's being said that they turn into that person, right? It's kind of like when you look at someone and you realize that you don't know them at all. I think it's that sort of feeling. Tossing out blame, drunk on this pain, crossing out the good years. The protagonist is saying that, you know, all the blame, all the finger pointing, all of this is making what we had lose its value. It's like you're ripping up the past, I don't know, 13 years, all of the triumphs we had, all of the records that were broken. You're just ripping them up like they're nothing. We can't even have that memory anymore. Everything is tarnished. That's what I think is being expressed here. And you're cursing my name, wishing I stayed. Look at how my tears ricochet. There's a different connotation to that in this verse a little bit. Look at how my tears ricochet. It's kind of like, look at what you've done to me, right? You're clearly in pain. You became what you never wanted to become. I'm sure you have regret about this. Look what you did to me. You're in pain and you caused me to be in pain. I believe that's what the protagonist is stating here. And those are all of the unique verses of this song. I wonder how long this video is gonna be. I'm at hour 2 of filming right now. Let's sum up this song. Closing thoughts. In conclusion, this song is very eloquently and beautifully written. I went over some possibilities with you guys of how to interpret this song. I talked about a more literal death that occurred, where this song would be from the perspective of like a ghost or a spirit, and it would be about the ending of a romantic relationship where they both loved each other and they didn't tell each other, and the regret and frustration that comes from that. And then we talked about a more metaphorical viewpoint of death and how that could be between two lovers in a romantic situation, or how this could maybe be about Taylor's situation with her old record label and her masters. I personally still don't know which one I vibe with the most. I'm between the literal death interpretation and this whole thing being from the perspective of a spirit or a ghost. I think the themes of regret and communication are expressed in a very poignant way, and how love never dies. I feel like the spirit was crying and their tears were ricocheting more because they saw the state of the life of their ex. They were seeing that they were in pain. So love never dies, which is very poignant. For the metaphorical death, I think that the lyric about the stolen lullabies really validates the theory that it's about the record label. I think all of these interpretations can be argued pretty well. At the beginning of this song, I thought it was more metaphorical, but now I'm like, oh, is it more literal? I still don't know, honestly. It changes. It depends on my mood. But that's all I have for this song. I hope that you got something from this and that it was valuable for you. Please let me know your thoughts down below. I like literally want to know what you think. Please make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it. It would help me out a lot and I would really appreciate it. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss any more of my analyses. Thank you for watching. I appreciate it, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye!